the Utah Jazz now have an opportunity to draft a really, really talented piece. Now, over the course of NBA basketball and NBA draft conversations, the list of transcendent players drafted and never working out is long. The highway is littered with the bodies of young players that we thought would be awesome that didn't turn out, okay? So there's no guarantees with any of this stuff. But this is a big deal, man. It's a massive deal. This is no small thing for this young franchise trying to make their way out of a 4-year rebuild to be serious about competing next year. So we'll get to it and talk a little bit about potentially where the Washington Wizards may be putting their attention right now. Indiana Pacers lost their pick. It's going to go to the Clippers. So unfortunate news if you're an Indiana Pacer fan. So NBA basketball, the playoffs roll along. The New York Knicks did not play one road game in their series against the 76ers. They went to Philly, and despite the plead of Joel Embiid, Knicks fans bought all the tickets they could on the secondary market, and that place sounded like Madison Square Garden. So New York rolls along into the Eastern Conference Finals, and they're going to await the winner of the Detroit Pistons-Cleveland Cavaliers series, which will continue tonight. Cleveland was able to get one over the weekend. They're going to try to even it up tonight. NBC and Peacock has that game for you. And then Amazon Prime will have OKC and the Los Angeles Lakers, Oklahoma City, trying to complete their sweep. So we will get to the storylines from the games tonight. We will discuss the games that we saw over the weekend. Victor Wembanyama ejected for an elbow thrown at Naz Reid. And Anthony Edwards looked like vintage Anthony Edwards on Mother's Day, 114-109. The T-Wolves got that win. And that series is deadlocked to 2 games apiece now. It'll head back to San Antonio to see, quite frankly, who's going to play Oklahoma City. And I'm starting to believe there isn't a team that is going to touch Oklahoma City, barring something crazy, of course. Where have we heard this before? Apparently the Milwaukee Bucks are open to trading Giannis Antetokounmpo. We thought that was going to happen last year, but according to the reports that came out today, it looks like Milwaukee is finally going to move on from Giannis, and we'll see where he ends up. The rookie minicamp for the NFL rookies rolling along, and the one in Cleveland opened up over the weekend, so we saw a little Spencer Fano, Logan Fano, who's there as a undrafted free agent, as the NFL offseason continues to kind of creep closer and closer to the fall. We're going to get the schedule coming up on Thursday, so a little football for you as well. RSL has now lost 3 of their last 4 matches. They went to Dallas and got whipped up pretty good. 3-1 your final score. Dallas beat them. It is a 3-week game for RSL. On Wednesday, Houston is in town. Then on Saturday, the hated Colorado Rapids. I like to call them the Crapids. I know, not cool. But we got Houston on Wednesday, Colorado on Saturday. And we're getting closer to that 2-month World Cup break for Real Salt Lake. So hopefully they can get back to form and win some games before we say goodbye to our local soccer club for 2 full months. All right, good guest list today. We'll start with CJ Moore from The Athletic. We'll talk some NBA playoff basketball, and we'll talk some draft as well with CJ. Good day to have Tom Haberstroh on. Our buddy Tom Haberstroh, weekly guest on the show. More NBA, more draft. Kurt Schmidt for the latest on RSL. And Bobby Marks, ESPN's front office insider and public enemy number 1 here in Salt Lake for a really weird 2-week period where everybody was attacking our guy Bobby. But one of my favorite guests, Bobby Marks, will roll by in the 4 o'clock hour. So a lot to do. CJ Moore, Tom Haberstroh, Kurt Schmidt, Bobby Marks, me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners, and that guy, NBA draft savant, Porter Larson. Number 2 pick, man. It's no small deal, man. That's a really, really big asset for the Jazz.
No, and for the first time in, I think, the lottery's history, the Jazz are actually moving up rather than back or staying put. So you have to consider it a win. I know with the presumptive number 1 pick being tied here locally, there are a lot of fans who are still somehow disappointed in that regard. They want the Jazz to trade up. They want to go get AJ. It's understandable, and obviously there's still storylines there. But yeah, if you get the number 2 pick in a draft, you, at that point, probably should just be confident in your scouting department, in your front office, to go out and get a good contributing piece, and maybe even an all-star or more. So not much to complain about if you're the Utah Jazz and that number 2 pick. but we'll continue the conversation because the AJ ties and the rest of the storylines are still pretty interesting.
How's your skincare routine?
Okay.
Okay.
Minimal.
Did a really dumb thing today.
Okay.
Got a new little skincare routine I'm doing based off of a recommendation from our friend Shelly at Wasatch Medical Spa. So I put serum on in the morning after I shower, and then I went and did yoga, and it in my eyes. Can you see? It looks like I have horrible allergies. If you're watching on YouTube, I did not take a massive bong rip before the show, but my eyes hurt. Dumb move by me.
Yeah, that's a rookie move.
It is.
I don't know what kind of chemicals are in that serum, but not eye chemicals.
No, didn't feel good. So kids, take care of your skin, but don't go sweat into your eyes afterwards. All right, CJ Moore, our first guest from The Athletic before CJ stops by, courtesy of our good friends at IFA Country Stores. It's time now for your opening tip. Now, with IFA's Weed and Feed, you'll go strong, healthy, dark green turf without a weed in sight. It's the ultimate lawn owner power move now at IFA.coop or one of your local stores. All right, history made yesterday. First of all, happy Mother's Day to all of you mothers out there. I'm not sure how many moms tune in to Sports Talk Radio, but if you do, hello, how are you? Hope you had a great Sunday. So hopefully took care of your mom, your wife, the women in our lives that helped to raise us. So did that first, and then sitting on the couch. It was it was tremendous theater. I'm not going to lie. Keontae George there representing the Utah Jazz. You could see Austin Ainge give a little fist pump when it was revealed that the Jazz were 2. Danny was there, of course. A lot of people from the Utah Jazz sitting, waiting to see what would happen. As for the first time in franchise history, 12 opportunities, the Jazz finally get a little lottery luck. Tied for the 4th best odds, they get number 2. Washington, number 1, and for the first time in 8 years, the team with the worst record in the NBA actually did land the top overall pick. And with the upcoming changes to the NBA draft lottery, it makes what happened yesterday even that much more important for the future of the Utah Jazz. Because moving forward, these teams that are the worst record in the NBA will not have the best odds and chances of getting the number 1 overall pick. So Washington at 1, Jazz at 2. Memphis had the 6th best odds. They move up to 3. And Chicago, your big winner, with the 9th best odds, they move to 4. So the 2 other teams tied with the Wizards for the best lottery odds, the 2 teams out of luck this year, the Indiana Pacers and the Brooklyn Nets. Indiana falls to 5, and Brooklyn falls to 6. The unfortunate part for Indiana, who took a gap year after the injury to Tyrese Halliburton, in the trade they made with the Clippers for Ivica Zubac, they sent the pick to the Clippers with some protections. But if it fell out of the bottom 4, that pick does go to L.A. So Indiana loses their pick, and they'll get their 2031 pick back instead. So unfortunate news for them. But what does this mean for the Utah Jazz? Okay, dig into a couple of things here. First of all, I felt bad for A.J. DiBonsa when the video came out of A.J., as it was revealed that Washington had the number 1 overall pick. He looked like somebody had just told him his dog passed away. He looked so bummed out. I think it's pretty clear with all of the reporting that's been done on this and certain conversations you have with people around basketball that this has been a pretty calculated deal by Ryan Smith to help get A.J. DiBonsa to Utah to play his high school ball, and then obviously writing checks to help get him to BYU. And I get it, man. I actually think it's smart. Ryan knows the deal. I mean, Ryan's a lifelong Jazz fan, not just the owner of the club. The one box the Jazz have been unable to check, at least the modern-day Utah Jazz, is retain, as we talked about. This is a 3-pronged deal. If you are a Jazz fan, it's draft, it's develop, and it's retain, okay? They've been able to draft reasonably well. Have they had misses? Absolutely. Everybody does. They've been able to develop reasonably well. In fact, probably more than reasonably well. They have a reputation of being an excellent organization at developing talent. But whether it's Gordon Hayward or Donovan Mitchell or Rudy Gobert or whoever, the last box for the superstar players that have been here has not been checked. It's retain. And Austin Ainge, during his presser availability after the lottery, said, we want whoever we draft to be with us for 10 years, okay? It's nice to want that, but the players got to want to stick around in addition, because after you sign your second deal, after that expires, you are an unrestricted free agent. That's the way the league works. Then, if you put the work in, you get to choose where you live. It's really one of the weirdest things about this kind of ecosystem, the pro sports ecosystem. These guys are the best in the world at what they do. And we say, oh, yeah, and by the way, you live in Sacramento now. I mean, so they earn the right to decide where they want to live, what team they want to play for. In Gordon's case, I think he wanted to go play for his college coach, but whatever it is. Okay, so if I had to guess, and I don't know this, but I just think if you're Washington, you've got to go AJ. I think AJ showed this year. And I do want to say one thing real quick. College tape, okay, for a lot of people, and I'm not expecting any of you to watch AAU or high school basketball, but for a lot of people, when these players get to college, it's the first time that you see them play, okay? But for Austin Ainge, for Danny Ainge, for the scouting staff of the Utah Jazz, or the scouting staff of the Washington Wizards, college tape is additive. It's not a conclusion, okay? And ultimately, when you look at A.J. DeBonsa, Darren Peterson, Cameron Boozer, Kingston Flemings, I could keep going. This freshman class has been on the radar of pro scouts, GMs, executives for 6 years, and maybe even more, because now the internet has shrunk the world. Social media is a place where you can say, holy smokes, that kid's only 12 years old. He looks like he can play college ball now. So you start to watch them develop, and you keep track of how they grow. And you're acutely aware at the age of 12, 13, 14, whether or not there is some potential in a player. So there is high school tape, there's AAU tape, there are these summer circuit camps, okay? These executives have been watching this freshman class for a long, long time, okay? So I think the narrative about Darren Peterson in college is getting a little bit overblown. And if you have some time this afternoon, head on over to YouTube and watch Darren Peterson's high school and AAU tape. It is nuts. And that's why, to start the year, he was the consensus number one overall prospect. Then the stuff comes out with Kansas. Is he sitting out intentionally? Is he really hurt? Is he sandbagging it a little bit? I can't speak to any of that. He did finally land on a creatine excuse, which, okay. Not sure why he landed on that. His agent clearly gave him some talking points because as he was doing the rounds and the interviews, he started to try to explain exactly what was going on. But I'll say if you analyze 5-6 years of tape that includes high school, AAU, and college, I wouldn't be stunned if Washington goes Darren Peterson. It wouldn't shock me. Like I said, it feels like the consensus is AJ for what he did at BYU this year and also the way he conducts himself. He is a worker. He is a pro. He's a machine. I mean, he's going to be an awesome player. So I'm going to guess Washington goes AJ at 1. And then I think Austin Ainge sent a message last year when he drafted Ace Bailey at 5. Because, again, the narrative was Ace doesn't want to come to Utah. His agent at the time that he fired released some really weird video. And you know where he was actually trying to get Ace to go was Washington, ironically enough. But Austin just said, I don't give a rip about any of this. I think he's the best guy on the board, so we're taking him. And Austin was right. Ace has turned out, at least as of now, after 1 year, to be a pretty exciting young talent. So because of that dynamic, I'm inclined to believe that Austin Ainge is going to go with whoever Washington leaves on the board outside of AJ, or including AJ and Darren Peterson. If Washington goes AJ, I just think Austin's going to take Darren Peterson. If Washington goes Darren Peterson, the Jazz will clearly take AJ DeBonsa. Finally, the wild card in this is Cameron Boozer, okay? Because we've discussed the dynamic of AJ knowing the state and the DeBonsas living here and the relationship with Ryan Smith. Well, Carlos Boozer works for the Jazz. Cameron Boozer, I believe, lived here once upon a time when his dad was playing ball. He was probably just a pup. But is there some sort of agreement that can be found? Are there backroom conversations? Like, yeah, you take Cam and he's sticking around, man. Ultimately, it's going to be up to the player. But it is so vital to get this right, okay? Before we catch a break, I need to underscore this. This is a massive, massive opportunity for the Jazz, the front office, the organization, the team, and the community. There's a lot of pressure on the Jazz to get this right. And again, it's a tough thing because there are so many players that have so much potential that never fully develop. So look, Austin's going to do the work. Danny's going to do the work. They've been watching these prospects for 5-6 years. I'm sure they already know what they're going to do at 2. Now, it's interesting to dance this dance with Washington as to whether or not they would trade the number 1 overall pick. So we're going to talk a lot about this. This is a massive thing. It's a historic day for the Utah Jazz. We'll catch a break. CJ Moore from The Athletic joins us coming up on a Monday edition of The Drive right here on ESPN 700. For the first time in franchise history, the Utah Jazz moved up in the draft lottery. Number 12 was the lucky number. John Stockton's number, huh? So the Jazz will draft number 2, upcoming on June the 23rd. And our next guest covers basketball for our friends at The Athletic. Good to welcome in CJ Moore on a Monday. CJ, how are you?
Doing well. How about yourselves?
I'm good. I appreciate the time. So let's just start at the top of the draft because, of course, the Jazz are sitting there at 2. Does it feel to you that it is a consensus that A.J. DeBonsa should be the number 1 overall pick? Do you think that's what Washington does?
Yeah, it seems that most NBA scouts are leaning that direction, I think, after the season. But I don't think it's like 100% type of deal. Like, I think that you probably have a handful of people who are still in the Darren Peterson camp. But I think as they pull back and they look at it and they consider risk and that kind of stuff, and I would think they probably go that direction.
So let's operate off that assumption. And again, we won't know until the 23rd, and who knows where Washington is at. But if Washington goes DeBonsa at 1, is it as easy as just saying, okay, Jazz, just take Darren Peterson? Or do you think there are other players in the conversation?
I mean, it definitely depends on what the Jazz think of Darren Peterson and if they believe that this creatine theory, that's why he had the cramping that he had. And you know, I'd really, really dive deep into his medical and consider that. And it's such a weird situation to where, like, to have a guy who is considered the 1 or 2 best, one of the 2 best prospects, and really have this strange sample size. Like, usually that's a college guy that has proven himself and been awesome, right? Like Boozer, for instance, has proven himself and was awesome this past year. Everybody kind of knows what he is. You kind of have an idea of what his faults are because you've got to see him play so many minutes in a high usage situation and with a really, really big role. So with Darren, it's just kind of strange because there were moments where he really, really popped. There's, preseason, he looked awesome. I was there last summer and went to a practice. He looked really, really good, but you never really saw the full capabilities of what he could be during his college season. So you're kind of going off his high school tape a little bit. You're going off as, like, was this the medical stuff just a 1-year thing, or is it something that's going to continue? So I would have some reservations. I'd want to really do my homework and have a great feel for it by the time, June 23rd gets here. The nice thing is they've got some time, and I'm sure they've figured some things out since the season's ended, and we'll see. But there are really some really other good players in the mix that you can consider. It's not like, well, we've got a Darren Peterson who's let's say he's an 8 on an 8 to 10 scale, and then the next guy's a 4. No, there's some others, that are really up in that category.
You wrote a piece for The Athletic on Darren in March. Does he care? ? The question followed Darren Peterson all year. He answers now. Let's unpack this a little bit, CJ, because I think a lot of people are pretty excited about I think everybody would love AJ. I mean, he played his college ball 40 minutes from where we're talking, and I think a lot of people believe that there's a chance that maybe he stays in a way that a lot of players just haven't for the Jazz. But I do think the potential of Darren Peterson should excite Jazz fans. I wonder what you learned writing this piece, and let's kind of unpack the piece you wrote in March on Darren Peterson.
Yeah, like I said, it was a strange situation all year. Like, back half of the year, I kind of knew through back channels of what was happening, but you couldn't necessarily report it. It was all off the record type stuff. And so, I was, if you really want to, I was trying to get a sit down with him for months and months and months to just, what happened, what was going on. And he was never, he might be the only player I've asked for in college basketball the last, 5 years maybe that, like, I haven't been able to get a sit down with, like I got AJ in the fall. Usually you can get those, when you're with a publication like The Athletic and you cover the game on a national scale. Like, you can get those. But with Darren, it was just such a weird situation. I think they were scared to put him in that spot to where he had to talk about it. And, I finally was able to ask questions at the Big 12 tournament after they lost and was open locker room. And to his credit, he opened up a little bit about it and what went on. And I think there was very much in his part, as he said in the recent story as well, that ESPN just did, that like there was a fear factor for him that, shoot, is this going to happen again? And I think that stayed with him throughout the course of the season. That would be why he would, be playing a game and looking great, and then all of a sudden just sit down and, signal to the bench, I got to come out and not go back in. So it was one of the most bizarre stories I've covered in this sport. I still don't have a great feel for, like, is he ever going to be the same again? But if he is going to, you can go back and watch the high school tape. He was phenomenal. You can go back and watch Louisville in the preseason, and I think he had like 22 or something like that in the first half. He was, there were moments where he was really, really special. When I watched him last summer, his pop, his athleticism just looked different than it did during the year. So I'd be very interested to be in the workouts with him now and, seeing what he looks like now. And, is that pop back? Because if it is, then yeah, he's got the chance to be a really, really special player in the NBA. I think Kansas kind of tried to protect him and using him off the ball, not have as much wear and tear on his body of like having the ball in his hands all the time. And he is a better player, I think, because like what I saw last summer is he can actually, distribute the ball and has really, really good vision and does more than just a score. And so that's what, like, if you're an NBA team, that's the stuff you're excited by, but you just really would like to have seen that over a long, over the season and doing that game in and game out, like a lot of these other prospects have been able to do this year.
Do you have any insight into the medicals? I think we'll get them, this week, combine going on right now. So maybe we'll hear some news in the coming days about what the medicals have revealed. And obviously, if you're the Jazz or anybody else, point number one is making sure that was just a moment in time and not a long-term concern. Do you have any idea what Darren's medicals have revealed?
I don't. I'm just as intrigued as everybody else.
Yeah.
And, like the create, like I am no doctor, right? But like the creatine excuse or reasoning, from talking to friends who have talked to doctors, like it seems a little off. So we'll see. Maybe it really was that, and that's what it was. And he's got it figured out, and he should be good. But I'm sure the Jazz have some smart people, smart doctors they can consult to feel that out, to whether that's a legit thing or not.
Let me go back to AJ for a moment. Somebody who covers the sport. I always am interested from the outside perspective looking in, because a lot of the conversation has been, Ryan Smith, owner of the Jazz, trying to get AJ out here to play high school ball first, which he did from the East Coast, and then ultimately being part of the group that was able to get AJ to go to BYU for a nice little chunk of change. And they know each other, and the Devances live here. Look, I don't know if you watched the lottery. When AJ saw that one was Washington, it looked like somebody told him his dog died. I think a lot of people believe he would like to be here. What's the narrative from the outside looking in, CJ, about the Ryan Smith, AJ Debonsa, BYU dynamic?
I think like there was no way they can control that in a way to make sure he'd end up there with the Jazz. But it would have been one heck of a story if he could have been, and I'm sure he would have been going to a situation where he feels comfortable because, I know Ryan's around that group and like it's friends with Kevin Young, and like it's not like AJ had never met him or never been around him before. Like obviously he has. He went to Jazz. When I was out there in the fall, the day before, he'd gone to the Jazz Suns game with Kevin. So I think there's obviously a familiarity and a comfort level there, but the way the NBA is, it's not like you can pick your destination. And I don't know that he's in like a Peyton Manning, Peyton Manning back in the day, I think was
it was Eli.
It was Eli. That's right. Could have decided his fate or whatever. I don't know that in the NBA you can do that or not. Yeah, I think in a perfect world for him, I'm sure he would have loved to have been with the Jazz.
Well, and I do have to wonder, we were talking about this earlier, and CJ Moore is with us, who covers hoops for The Athletic. You know, Danny Ainge and his boy Austin Ainge, they're now running the show. And, you know, they were, I don't know how many other people thought that Jason Tatum was a better prospect than Markelle Fultz, but Danny did. And so traded the number 1 overall pick to Philly and said, go ahead, take him. We like this other guy better. I wonder if there's some possibility out there that maybe Washington actually wants Darren Peterson and the Jazz wanting A.J. Dubonsa. Maybe there's some sort of arrangement that could be worked out, some sort of trade, because it's not like Washington is going to let the Jazz know, like, hey, we just want Darren Peterson, because they have the chip. The Jazz have to go get it. So I don't know, like a number 2, an Ace Bailey. I don't know. I just wonder if there could be a dynamic similar to that Tatum Fultz situation that Danny could capitalize if they really want AJ as bad as it seems like they do.
Yeah, and like you said, he's been as smart at kind of making that, turning what he wants into reality as anybody has in a long time. So. Yeah, it's certainly possible. I can't pretend to know the dynamics with the NBA teams like I do with the college teams, but I think that if they want them, there's probably a price for everything, right?
Yep. There's another interesting wild card here, CJ, and as you know, Carlos Boozer played for the Jazz, and now he works for the Jazz. A lot of people think they may have hired him after watching Cameron start to develop. I can't corroborate that, but most draft boards have him at 3. I think it was Hollinger who has him at 1 overall. So again, we've been watching this freshman class play basketball for 4, 5, 6 years. Your point about Darren's tape prior to Kansas is something I've been underscoring quite a bit because I think he's awesome. But what about Cameron Boozer? What has stood out to you about the way you've watched him grow, and what kind of pro do you think he's going to be?
Yeah, I always did think he would be the best college player of that group of kids, just because I thought his skill set and the way he played really, really translated to the college game. I do think in high school, he could shoot it and he could face up and he could do the different things that he did this past year. But I did think he took a step in terms of his, like, they ran ball screens for him as the handler. I thought there was some impressive stuff he did there. I've heard Kevin Love as thrown out as an example of the guy that he could be, and I see that, like, even maybe a mix between college Kevin Young and pro Kevin Young, because pro Kevin Young got really, really skinny. Cameron's kind of in between the body type of college Kevin Love and NBA Kevin Love. So I think the ceiling for Peterson and AJ are probably higher just because of what they can do athletically at their size, and the stuff with Cam and does length give him troubles? Like, it does. Like, you can see it in games, but he also is really, really smart and kind of knows how to navigate it and knows how to limit his limitations in a way, right? Like, he's really, really strong. He knows how to work angles. I think he's going to be a really, really solid pro. I think the floor for him is probably the highest of any of the guys, but the ceiling probably isn't quite as high.
Big winner yesterday, of course. We're pumped that the Jazz got 2, but Chicago moves up to 4. And Gordy Chiesa, 36 years as a pro and college coach, is a consistent guest on our radio station. And he's not the only one, but he loves Caleb Wilson. Now, I'm going to underscore a point, again, you made earlier. Yeah, he was injured, and we didn't get to see a ton of him in college, but you go to YouTube, same thing with Darren. You watch Caleb, there's plenty of tape that indicates he is just a high-flying elite athlete. So same question. I don't know that he'd be in the mix at 2 for the Jazz. Maybe, though. How have you watched him grow? What kind of player is he?
Yeah, I think he got enough. I think we saw enough to kind of have an idea. Like, because when he was playing and he was at his full capabilities, and he did play quite a bit of the season. when I saw him in high school, I thought he was could be like an Anthony Davis type impact as a defender, because he was, I believe he played on the same team as Boozer in grassroots. And so he did a lot defensively for them and, showed his versatility there. What's crazy is in college, the offensive stuff really popped. And I thought he was he was not the best defender in terms of his feel off the ball. In college, in high school, you're just kind of watching what the tools are, right? But in college, you're paying more attention to what's happening possession by possession. And there were times where he would fall asleep off ball. He was out of position, but he does still have the tools stuff. So if you can coach him up the right way, defensively, he has a chance to be really, really special because he has the length, he has the athleticism. He can guard multiple positions. And then I was impressed with what he was able to do offensively. He was, from a mid-range, turnarounds, jumpers, and he made really, really hard shots, and he made them look pretty easy. And then, around the basket, he's obviously awesome. Just, he tries to dunk everything. If he can develop his three-point shot eventually, he doesn't have that yet, then you really get excited about what he could be. So he's another guy that, you think the ceiling's probably pretty high. And, I think he did enough in college to kind of be in this conversation of, well, is there a top three or is Caleb Wilson, part of this mix?
Let me go back to AJ versus Darren real quick. Defensively, how do you analyze the two of them as defensive pieces? Because the Jazz have been the worst defensive team in pro basketball. And by the way, historically bad. Now they bring in Jaren Jackson Jr. That will help. I think they're going to bring back Walker Kessler via, his restricted free agency. I think they'll match anything that comes his way. So you get those two bigs back. That will help. Their guards right now, defensively on the perimeter, are atrocious. Keontae had some nice moments of growth last year offensively, but some of the defensive metrics individually, CJ, can get a little cloudy, but who's a better ready-made pro basketball defensive wing option out of AJ and Darren?
I would probably lean AJ just because of the length and the his quick twitch is pretty remarkable. He has a chance to be a all-league type defender if everything comes together in terms of his feel on that side of the ball. I think he still has room to grow, but he's got a chance to be really, really special there. I think Darren showed some stuff in high school that, again, in college, he didn't have the pop that he had before. There was some, I watched a lot of Kansas basketball because I live in Kansas City, so I went to that school, so I paid fairly close attention to him. And, there was some off-ball stuff that was concerning with him, but also I just think he was kind of holding a little bit in reserve, because he was scared with what was going on with his body. And I don't know that it told the whole story, but he has moments where there's some instincts that are pretty impressive, but his defensive tape for the college season wasn't awesome.
Is there any other, and you referenced this a couple minutes ago, it does appear, at least everything that I've read or heard, that most people believe it's a deep draft, but the top four are the top four. If we move out of that top four, who else do you like? As far as, moving away from these top four pillar players, who's left over for the other teams that you think will make a difference in the NBA?
Well, obviously, Keaton is he's number 5 on our big board. Strangely enough, he went to my old high school, was classmates with my son.
Nice.
I've been playing pickup ball with him for years. I feel like I had a really good familiarity with him. His story is pretty crazy and amazing, and nobody saw this coming. But at his size, with how well he shoots the ball, with how well he handles it, just kind of his feel for the game is pretty darn special. I'm very interested to see if his body continues to develop. But I will tell you, from high school to from this time now, or this time a year ago to now, he has made some big jumps there. Even though he still looks like a pretty skinny guy, he has put on some weight and put on some muscle. Acuff is obviously one of the best scoring guards we've seen in college for the last decade, and he was awesome. Obviously, there's some defensive concerns there. He's not as tall as some of these other guys. Height really matters in the NBA. We've seen that for years and years, but he is a special scorer. I think that, like, as you go down the list, like Nate Ament is somebody that's really intriguing, but, probably a couple of years away. Adai Mara, as much as height matters and the way he can pass the ball, he's a guy that I really freaking love. And just like one of the best humans you'll come across. So I think he has a chance to be really, really special. Yaxel from that Michigan team, he is older, but I think he's another guy that's like probably got a pretty high floor. So it's a good draft. LeBaron Philon, also his speed is special. If you were taking this group of guards and betting on him, like he's one that's maybe a little lower that I would bet on just because I think his speed is elite and he's got a little bit more size than like if you're just taking him and Darius Acuff, like I might put my money on Philon, even though Acuff's considered the better prospect at this point.
Interesting. We only really have one other local kid that will be involved in the NBA draft, I think, and unfortunately, Richie Saunders went down with an injury, and the word is he came back to try to play his way maybe into the fringe first round. Not sure if that was ever going to be possible. But he is really, he turned out to be a much better player than I ever thought he could be. So with the injury in mind, what sort of range do you think we'll see Richie Saunders be drafted in?
I bet he goes somewhere in the second round. I think with his shooting and size and athleticism, somebody's going to take a chance. And also, like, he's going to interview really well. I talked to Richie maybe 3 times this year, and he always came across like really, really mature young man, and that stuff matters. Like I had a scout tell me a few years ago, like there aren't many assholes left in the NBA. Like excuse my language, hopefully don't have to beat that one. But he's one of those guys that I think will and GM scouts are going to really, really like when they do the interview stuff, and that stuff matters. So I anticipate that he'll go somewhere in the second round.
Hey, before I set you loose, we are the home of the Utes, and that's my alma mater. That's where I went. And when I was there, Rick Majerus was the coach, and the basketball team was very fun. Alex Jensen has taken over, and love Al, good friend of the show, has been on multiple times. He's got a lot of work to do. And I don't know how much you know about any of these transfer portal additions. I know you write a lot on the transfer portal. Jackson Holcomb had a really good year at UVU last year. Tayson Chapman, Ohio State. Malik Goma from Weber State, and then TJ Birch from Wright State. There's some European players that are also in the mix. We haven't been able to talk about them because it's not official yet. So before I set you loose, just give me a thought on the Utes, what you expect year 2 under Alex Jensen.
Yeah, I went by there in the fall and spent a couple of days, and I did get an impression that, like, they were well aware that it was going to take a little while, right? And like they were going to be patient. So I think you have to wait after next year, maybe the year after, before you like really start to judge like what he can do as a coach. But I do know the international guy that they got, who was just in the G League Summit, is supposed to be awesome, apparently, point guard. And then I'd be lying to you if I told you I knew about all of these transfers. I did watch tape on the Utah Valley, Jackson Holcomb. Like I do think he's legit. I think he can play up a level and will be able to handle it. But it's so hard sometimes to know like how a guy is going to translate from the mid-major level to the high major level. And so we'll see. But getting some, I think it's smart to dive in those international waters, and obviously sounds like they've landed a good one in the point guard they have coming in.
CJ, thanks for the time, man. Keep up the good work, and we'll get you on again soon. Appreciate you.
All right, thanks for having me. Take care.
CJ Moore covers college basketball for The Athletic. Some good stuff on some of the young prospects there, and a colorful explanation of a personality type that no longer works in the NBA. Did you catch that?
Barely.
All right. Are we going to have to scrub that up a bit when we post it online?
I'll leave that up to you.
Okay. I would lean towards yes. All right, we'll catch a break. 1 hour down, 3 hours to go. Tom Haberstroh joins us coming up next. We got Kurt Schmidt later on and Bobby Marks. Good Monday show for you. Keep it here on ESPN 700. NBA Combine going on right now, which means it's time for one of the strangest things that we do to hear about, like, during this process. Why are we measuring these players without shoes? Every year. So Gavoni's texting out the measurements, okay? So AJ measured 6'8.5" barefoot. Everybody wears sneakers when they play basketball. Why are we measuring these kids without their shoes on? I've never understood it.
Because that's how tall they are.
But they're during a game they play, like,
you can infer otherwise.
I've got an idea. Dating profiles, you've got to put your height with your shoes off. No more of this manipulating the process.
I think just in general, like, if you're going to measure someone's height, they shouldn't be wearing anything under their feet or on top of their head.
But anyway.
I get what you're saying. I think everyone should, and from the beginning of the process, should have been being measured without shoes on. And then you can infer based on, I don't know, maybe they wear some platform shoes for you.
Tom Haberstroh, how tall are you without shoes?
This is a sore point in my life.
Oh, sorry, man.
You just struck a nerve. I'm 5'11 3/4.
Okay.
With no shoes on. So I'm pro shoe measurements because that makes me 6+.
So we're like the exact same height because I never measured six feet ever. I'm 5'11". Most people believe there's no such thing. You're either 6 feet or 5'10". So
now we know why.
So we're like the exact same height. A little known fact now, Tom.
Yeah, my father-in-law is the same way, and he's like, "Why do you care so much?" And I think it's because I grew up like a basketball player, and so your height matters more than anything. And so for me, I have two older brothers who are taller than me by like 2-3 inches, and so it always was just this sore spot that I never could quite clear 6 feet. But I'm learning now that, if this was, at the Combine, I would for sure have all my insecurities laid bare by Jonathan Gavoni and all the other writers. So I'm glad it's just to your audience that I'm being vulnerable here.
Well, I appreciate the vulnerability, Tom. That's what I like about you. So for my old man's 6'5", my mom's 5'2", and only one. There are 4 boys, and Andrew is the only one that got the size. He's 6'3", and he was a thespian. He was like an actor. He didn't even play basketball. It really bummed me out.
That seems like Mozart's kids just being like, yeah, I actually just really like gardening.
Yes.
Yep. And that feels, it is interesting because I'm looking at these combine measurements and I find myself doing the math in my head and seeing that Cam Boozer is 6'8" and a quarter inch tall, and then doing the whole shoe math, and I'm like, okay, so he's 6'10". But then there have been studies that have shown that height is actually overrated because it is ineffective height in a sense where if you really want to get down to it, there might be big neck out there, meaning this big, this subtle thing that if you have a really long neck, your height, you might be like 7 feet tall, but effectively you play like you're 6'8" or 6'9" simply by having a long neck. And so for all these neck truthers out there, I think they want to look at standing reach or that sort of thing where like a guy like Rudy Gobert is going to shine, like do really good in that comparison. Whereas someone who has like a long neck or a short neck, that stuff matters. So I think as passionate as you are about the shoe, no shoe thing, I think I'm on that same energy when it comes to height and standing reach. I care much more about standing reach than I do height.
I'm sorry, did you say neck truthers?
Yes.
What?
Yeah.
That's a thing, huh?
There's some people out there that say, oh, Chris Bosh was never really that tall because he just had a long neck. They were neck truthers. And, I'm just I think he had a long wingspan, so it negated that. But there are people out there that look at wingspan a lot more. Jay Billis popularized the term for sure, but I would say there are some neck truthers out there.
Interesting. Learn something new every day when Tom's on the show, I'll tell you what. All right, Tom, historic day yesterday. For the first time in franchise history, the Utah Jazz moved up in the lottery. 12th time is the charm. So they snagged number 2. So let's get into this for a moment. I feel like it seems to be as close to a consensus that you're going to get with a draft like this, that AJ is the guy at 1. Now, of course, AJ has ties here. His family lives here. He played basketball at BYU. The Ryan Smith, AJ DeBonsa dynamic is well documented. And when they showed his face after Washington won the lottery, it looked like somebody had told him his dog just died. So it became pretty clear that I think he wants Salt Lake. I think he wants the Jazz. I don't know. But top 2, does it seem like Washington goes AJ and therefore Utah goes Darren Peterson?
Yeah, if I'm Washington, I call up Austin Ainge and the organization over in Utah, and I say, what will it take to move up for you guys? What will it take? Because we want AJ DeBonsa, and I know you guys do too. But if you really want to get number 1 here, what's the asking price here, or what's it gonna take? Because I really do think that Utah, in a way, they've shown all their cards now that they would love to get in the AJ DeBonsa business, and they hedged their bets with the Cam Boozer, hiring Carlos Boozer as a consultant. That seems like, to me, a nice way to diversify your risk here, is that, hey, if we get AJ DeBonsa, great. If we don't, we have another option here in Cameron Boozer. And then there's, of course, Darren Peterson and Caleb Wilson. I would put Caleb Wilson at 3. I would put AJ DeBonsa at 2 and Cameron Boozer at 1 and Darren Peterson at 4. That's me, but I understand why people are enthralled with the prospect of AJ DeBonsa. I also think he's awesome. But for me, if you look back at the Markelle Fultz year, and you look at how the conversation around Markelle Fultz was almost unanimous that he was going to be a better player. Now you can, in your head, see that Jason Tatum is the better player. And of course we should have seen this coming, but it wasn't that at the time. And when Philadelphia landed the number 3 pick and traded up to go get Markelle Fultz, and Jason Tatum fell to number 3, it wasn't this home run move in Boston's eyes. People didn't view that as a home run at the time. And the 76ers just felt like, look, we're done with the process. Let's go get our guy. And they ended up getting Markelle Fultz, and with Ben Simmons in the fold. And Brian Colangelo, through his burner controversy, Burnergate, he didn't really see that through. Neither did Sam Hinkie, by the way. But the point is, I don't think that Washington should be afraid, if it really is like a tie on their big board, of Cam Boozer, Darren Peterson, AJ DeBonsa. The organization has made it clear, and same with Utah, that they're open for business, that they are going to market and test the waters on a potential trade. And I think they're smart to do that, because who knows what Utah is willing to do to get AJ DeBonsa. But I would say, in my eyes, I think Cam Boozer is just as good of a prospect. And the leverage here is you want Washington to believe that you're in love with Cam Boozer, that you're fine with Cam Boozer or Darren Peterson. And at the moment, the way we talk about it is AJ DeBonsa wants to go to Utah, and Utah wants AJ DeBonsa. And the more that conversation happens, the less leverage that Ryan Smith and the organization has in talks with Washington. Because I think Washington really wants Utah to want AJ DeBonsa. And I can understand why Utah fans want the guy, but man, they gotta lower that temperature, because that loses a lot of leverage in these talks.
Well, remember, Danny Ainge is the one that made that trade with Philly. It felt like Danny was like the only one that wanted Tatum. He said, go ahead and take Fultz because we like this guy better. And turned out he was right. But let's say that Washington is open to talking with the Jazz about moving one. And the Jazz ultimately would obviously use that to draft AJ. What sort of package do you think would be out there? I mean, the Jazz still have a a bevy of future draft assets. They used some on the Jaren Jackson Jr. trade, but they're going to have their next year. Some of the Mitchell stuff starts to come in. Second most favorable of their own, Cleveland and Minnesota. They've got a swap with Cleveland after that. Then in 2029, it's the same deal with Utah, Cleveland, Minnesota. This is the Gobert Mitchell stuff. I believe they have a future Phoenix pick. Oh, no, they traded that in the Jaren Jackson Jr. deal. So there are still several tradable picks out there for the Jazz to offer. If you're running Washington and I'm running Utah, what do you want for the number 1 overall pick?
Yeah, I'm going to want at least one first-round pick. And just to peg it towards that Danny Ainge deal, they moved from 3 to 1.
Yep.
And they got a first-round draft pick that ended up turning into Romeo Langford with Sacramento's first-round pick a couple years later. It didn't turn out well for Boston on that end in terms of the asset that they acquired in addition to moving down to 3 to get Jason Tatum. So I think that would be the asking price. I've seen people say, hey, Ace Bailey has to be thrown in there too. I think that's too steep to just move it up one spot. But I think Washington should be asking for those things. They should start by asking for multiple first-round picks because in their mind, they understand that A.J. DeBonsa is the guy for Utah, or at least they perceive that to be just based on all of the directions pointing between those two people. And I just want to point out here, Spence, I felt the same way about Cooper Flagg when they announced that Cooper Flagg, that the Dallas Mavericks won the lottery, and they panned over to Cooper Flagg at the draft lottery, and he looked like he was green and he was ready to throw up.
Yep.
And we all know how that turned out. He gets Rookie of the Year. He's an absolute stud in his rookie season, and he's everything that they imagined and more for that franchise. Masai Ujiri now taking over with Mike Schmitz, and no one's here talking about the face that Cooper Flagg made when the Dallas Mavericks won the lottery, and he had to fill the shoes of the Luka Doncic trade. No one expected him to really want that situation, and it ended up a year later. Looks like a really good spot for him. So I don't want to throw cold water on the fan base there in Utah, but I would just say I felt the same way when I saw A.J. DeBonsa in the draft lottery show and being like, man, he doesn't seem like he's thrilled about Washington getting the number 1 overall pick. But I felt similarly with the Cooper Flagg thing, and we know that in the long run, it didn't seem to matter.
So one idea, and look, obviously these trade options you find online more often than not are silly. But, last year, and who knows what's real and what isn't with the whole Ace Bailey thing from a year ago, the agent he had or whatever that dude was just released a weird video that he was clearly trying to get Ace to Washington. And the narrative was Ace didn't want to come to Utah. And I love that Austin was like, I don't care. You're the best player on the board. We're drafting you. So what about a scenario where the Jazz say, okay, we'll give you 2 and we'll give you Ace and you give us 1? Is that too much to move up 1 pick? I mean, if you've done your calculation, you think A.J. DeBonsa is generationally special. I do know they love Ace. I can tell you the Jazz love Ace. Is that too much, number 2 and Ace Bailey, to move up to number 1 and draft A.J. DeBonsa?
I would say so because for Utah, if I flip it and say, is Ace Bailey plus Cam Boozer worth A.J. DeBonsa? Because you're giving up the opportunity to take Cam Boozer at number 2. And so really you could have both Ace Bailey and Darren Peterson, or Ace Bailey and Cam Boozer. And so for me, if I'm the Ainges and I'm the organization looking at this, I would say that is too steep of price to pay. Now, I get why if you think DeBonsa is that much better in a light draft, this is not a light draft. So I think Ace Bailey is probably too steep. And I would say, if Washington wants Ace Bailey, that's another thing. Then you go back to the drawing board and you say, all right, well, if you want Ace, then we'll swap one of your top prospects with our guy, and we'll do A.J. DeBonsa, Ace Bailey, for Will Riley and the rights to the number 1 overall pick, or Bilal Cool, whoever it is, Bub Carrington. I don't think that they would put in Alex Sarr in that particular trade. But I would say that the Anthony Davis factor here with regard to Washington, I think he's a rental. You know, the idea that like A.J. DeBonsa is a better fit for Washington because they have A.D. and Alex Sarr rather than Cam Boozer, I don't buy that for a second. I think what the Washington Wizards were, where they saw an asset opportunity with getting an injured star in Anthony Davis, as crazy as that sounds, to help them tank, and they get a first-round pick in in Anthony Davis deal. They get the opportunity to get a guy that they believe they can flip to a contender this summer and get more assets for them in their rebuild. That makes more sense to me than they were actually truly trying to compete this year. So they got their number 1 overall pick, and I think with that, I think they would be more likely to move Anthony Davis than say, hey, we think A.J. DeBonsa can help us win the East next year. Because you're getting Trae Young and Anthony Davis for like a 1 to 2 year window. I think the idea that they would pick DeBonsa purely because of the fit on the roster is overblown, and I could totally see Washington just saying, you know what, we'll trade down and take Cam Boozer at number 2 or at number 3, whatever the market is dictating, and then they'll move Anthony Davis to get more assets that make more sense on the team. Now, the same logic with the Utah Jazz, I don't see the Utah Jazz being married to the Jaren Jackson idea. I think similarly, if they get Cam Boozer and the right deal comes along for Jaren Jackson, I don't think that they're going to be necessarily turning down all offers for Jaren Jackson Jr. This is all to say that I understand why people think this is their favorite time of year, because the Anthony Davis and Jaren Jackson Jr. acquisitions at the trade deadline seem to suggest that these teams are arming up, but I wouldn't be shocked if Jaren Jackson Jr. is not on the roster and Cameron Boozer is on the roster for Utah next season. Similarly, the same goes for Anthony Davis and Cam Boozer in Washington.
Who are you higher on, Bilal Coulibaly or Bub Carrington?
Well, Coulibaly has really stalled, and in a weird way, I think is an interesting Denny Abdia acquisition where, in the right circumstance, change of scenery, he played better for Team France. And frankly speaking, I thought he had a really tough year this year. A lot more defensive upside than Bub Carrington. And for a team like Utah, I would be interested in getting a Coulibaly buy low candidate because I think they need defense in a real way. And if they draft A.J. DeBonsa, I think you're going to get a lot of, similar issues where you're just getting it's certainly better on offense, and he's got some defensive talent, but I think you want to add more on the roster because, as we've talked about before, this isn't just a bad defense, it's historically bad. So any piece that can help on that end of the floor, and Bilal Coulibaly projects as a much better defensive player than Bub Carrington. But the other thing here is that Carrington's super young and fits the timeline for the Utah Jazz if they were to get a Cam Boozer or A.J. DeBonsa.
What about ace and 2 for Coulibaly and 1? What about that?
I would, if I'm Utah, I don't think I do that deal because then you got to pay Coulibaly. So it's not the best situation in terms of assets. I would be probably more inclined to look at Trey Johnson or someone else. Will Riley really turned it on at the end of last year. So if I'm looking at the Washington Wizards and their assets going forward, of course, Alex Sarr is at the top of that list. But if you're going to ask me who would I rather have, Coulibaly, Bub Carrington, or Will Riley on their contracts, I might even go Will Riley at the top of that list.
Interesting. All right, before we get to some thoughts about the series that are still going on, let's operate off an assumption, which is never a good idea in basketball and in life, kids, 4 agreements. But number one, let's say Washington doesn't overthink it. They've done their calculation. They want AJ. And let's just say the Jazz go Darren Peterson at 2. What does this team look like next year?
I don't like Darren Peterson as a prospect, man. I'm telling you, I might die on this hill, but I think his playmaking skills or his assist rate is really scary for me in Bill Self's system. I think he's a couple years away from being an all-star, like a few years away from being an all-star caliber player. And I think the Jazz would be much better off getting Cam Boozer here and figuring out the fit with Jaren Jackson Jr. And Walker Kessler. Darren Peterson strikes me as someone who's dealing with a lot of bodily issues that need to be figured out. Much more risk there, especially at his size and his complete lack of playmaking. He's not a passer. He's not someone that has shown at either level that he is going to be a high-level passer. And so in Will Hardy's system, I'm not really excited about him in a Utah Jazz uniform in ways that Cam Boozer are much more excited. So if he's on the team with Ace Bailey at the 3, I have real concerns that Utah is going to be a winning outfit next year and would be able to address their defensive issues. And so, yeah, Lauri Markkanen at the 3, Ace Bailey coming off the bench, Darren Peterson stepping in at the 2 with Keontae George and Jaren Jackson Jr. at the 4. And let's just say Walker Kessler is coming back. I think that team still has defensive issues, but I would much rather see Cam Boozer and Caleb Wilson than Darren Peterson in that role.
So between the two, Boozer and Caleb, who would you take between those two?
Boozer's my number 1 guy. So
that's
I would
right.
take
That's right.
Cam Boozer 1, Devonta 2, Caleb Wilson 3, and Darren Peterson 4. Caleb Wilson, his injury factor is less concerning to me than the Darren Peterson mysterious creatine cramp issues that he would be subbing out in the middle of the games as the top prospect. That is concerning to me. But when you're looking at Darren Peterson and the fact that he only averaged 2 assists every 36 minutes, and Devonta had a better scoring rate, Cam Boozer had just as good of a scoring rate, and he had twice as many rebounds, just about the same steal rate as Darren Peterson. This tells me that there's like other parts of his IQ, like as a basketball player and feel as a basketball player, that for Darren Peterson, I just have a real concern about his ability to be a playmaker at this next level. Like, you can't just be a scorer like Jalen Green and be able to survive in the playoffs. We know Jalen Green can score with the best of them and get to his shots and shoot in the mid-range. But to me, I want to see more from Darren Peterson if I'm going to be choosing between him and a guy like Caleb Wilson, who's a 6'10" scorer and has a much better playmaking ability. Look, Caleb Wilson can give you defensively a lot more than Darren Peterson. So from that standpoint, you're getting just as good of a scorer and athlete, but you're getting a lot more playmaking and defense. And I think Utah and Will Hardy would be much more interested in that profile than, say, one who doesn't pass and doesn't play a lot of defense.
Okay, let me bottom line this then, Tom. What do you think they will do? Let's say no trade is made and they're just going to draft a 2. What do you think the Jazz will ultimately do with that pick?
I think they take Cam Boozer. I think they take the best prospect on the board, and people can say the athleticism isn't there. But I think in today's NBA, it's not about your vertical. It's about how you decelerate. It's how you move, your feel for the game. And to me, there's a lot of the Luka Doncic comparison with Cam Boozer in that people look at Cam Boozer and see that he's heavy or see that he doesn't fly through the gym, and they see a guy who we can't project as being an MVP in this league. But I see the age and the way that he dominated, and it reminds me a lot of Luka Doncic. Now, he's not the level of passer that Luka is, that a guy you could see averaging 10 assists a game. But I just see the same qualities in him that he can game manage and do a great job of getting his teammates involved and use his body in ways that he will overpower opponents. And he's just 18 years old. So when you're projecting this guy, remember, in the same way that Cooper Flagg was dominating when he was 17 and 18 years old, same thing applies for Cam Boozer. I think he's going to be a lot more effective at the next level than people are giving him credit for, because I just think that he's growing into his body, and he's that strong already. I think he's just going to be a really, really elite player. And so I think they'll take him at number 2 if DeBonce is off the board.
Reports are now surfacing that finally Milwaukee will move Giannis. Okay, so it's out there. It's been out there, but apparently now they're willing to do that. What makes sense? Is there a team with the top 4 or 5 pick that would move that asset for Giannis, even at a bit of an advanced age? How do you think this plays out?
I don't see a team in the top 4 moving in order to get Giannis. The logical explanation would be maybe a team like the Clippers use that number 5 pick that they have to flip that to go get a guy like Giannis. And I will say, before the season, because of the aspiration deal, I was expecting that Giannis would be one of the type of players that maybe the Clippers would go for and put all their chips in the middle. Because if Adam Silver sits here and says, look, we're going to take the next 3 first-round picks by the Clippers as a punishment in the Steve Ballmer investigation, then I would, if I'm Lawrence Frank and the Clippers, I'm trading those picks right away so that can be off the board. The NBA can't necessarily say, if you traded for Giannis Antetokounmpo with those picks that you have, that we're now going to renege that deal and essentially return Giannis Antetokounmpo to the Milwaukee Bucks. I don't think that would happen. But now, if you have Kawhi Leonard on the team, and we'll see what happens with his contract situation, but this definitely changes things for the Clippers, moving up I guess Indiana moving back to number 5 and having Darius Garland, Kawhi Leonard, and Benedict Mathurin on your team. It would make sense for them to use that 5 to go get a player. It is tricky, though, because in the Joe Smith scandal with the Minnesota Timberwolves, the NBA did pull first-round picks from them. However, it was their first-round picks. It wasn't the Indiana pick that you acquired in that deal. And I'd be surprised if the NBA not only took the first-round picks that they own, but also took picks that they acquired in a trade. It might happen anyway. But I don't think that the Milwaukee Bucks situation is going to be changed by the draft lottery. I would say the Milwaukee Bucks situation would change if, say, Giannis, made an actual trade demand, which to this day has not happened quite publicly, even though it's all very wishy-washy reporting today. Is some new reporting from Shams Charania saying that they'd be open for business. I kind of feel like this has been going on for the last year or so. The most interesting thing to me about this, Spence, is the Karl-Anthony Towns aspect of it all. The New York Knicks, they engaged with the Milwaukee Bucks as was reported last year. The talks didn't go anywhere, but I'm wondering if Karl-Anthony Towns has been so good in this postseason, him being a hub as a passer, does Milwaukee look at this situation and say, you know what? A Giannis for Karl-Anthony Towns swap didn't seem so appetizing before, but now the way that he has been a lot more better utilized in Mike Brown's system, maybe Taylor Jenkins says, like, yeah, let's use Karl-Anthony Towns as a hub offensively, and we don't need to tank in order to rebuild in the Eastern Conference. With Karl-Anthony Towns in the fold and a reimagined roster, maybe we can get that asset, Karl-Anthony Towns, much better than he was a year ago. And so maybe that changes things if Karl-Anthony Towns continues to take off. I don't think if the Milwaukee Bucks engaged in trade talks with the Knicks that they would really pull the trigger on the few draft assets that they would get in a Karl-Anthony Towns Giannis swap. But I do think that might be the most interesting wrinkle in this whole thing is Milwaukee more entertained in those trade talks now because of the way that Karl-Anthony Towns has turned into like a Jokic-like hub passer with double-digit assists in playoff games seemingly every other game.
So with the remaining few minutes we have left, let's move over to the teams that are still playing. You just referenced one of them, and the Knicks haven't played in the finals since 1999 when Patrick Ewing went down, and Marcus Camby randomly burst on the scene as this energetic, high-flying, shot-blocking center. They unfortunately lost to the Spurs, of course, with no Ewing. It was tough to, deal with Robinson and Duncan. But I don't know, man. Like, they have been historically good offensively, winning 7 straight games now. And over the past 10, their net is plus 194, which is the best all time. How much of this is sustainable, and who out of Cleveland and Detroit give them more problems?
I think Detroit does. I don't think that the Cleveland Cavaliers play with enough force in order to really scare the Knicks. We'll see what happens with the OG Anunoby deal. His hamstring injury is very concerning, but the fact that they can buy some time here by disposing of the Philadelphia 76ers in 4 games really helps them try to get him back and not have him to exacerbate that issue, rushing him back to save that series. So that's really important. I think the Knicks should be considered the favorites out east. The Detroit Pistons have not been able to find that second creator in, I would say Tobias Harris is a finisher, not necessarily a creator. And I think without a guy like Jamal Murray, and I've thought about with Jokic and them being able to retool around Jokic, I wonder if the Detroit Pistons, if they go out in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Knicks, I wonder if the Detroit Pistons say, we need to go get a guy like Jamal Murray. We really need to go and strike now and try to take advantage of this window that we have with Cade Cunningham, Jalen Duren, and try to get another ball handler next to Cade Cunningham. I think right now the Knicks should be considered the favorites. Detroit, with the way that they play with force and Cade Cunningham, I think they're a better team because of Jalen Duren than they were last year. But I do think that the Knicks right now have to be considered the favorite, and I think that the way that they've changed everything with the Karl Anthony Towns relieving the pressure off of Jalen Brunson has been a masterful stroke by Mike Brown, and it might just get them out of the East and getting into the NBA Finals. First time since '99, as you mentioned.
Let's move over out this way before I set you loose. And, of course, San Antonio, Minnesota is now more interesting than it was, deadlocked at 2. And Wembanyama thrown out for – and, look, I think he deserved it. A lot of conversation. I thought it was the right call. It unfortunately made that game a little bit more less entertaining to watch because he's so fun. But where are you at now with the series, and what were your thoughts watching that Wembanyama play?
Yeah, I think he deserved to get ejected. The way that he looked back at Naz Reid to make sure he was there, and then he elbowed him, I think he deserved to get the flagrant 2. I think the interesting thing for me is Michael C. Wright over at ESPN mentioned in his research at ESPN that was the earliest an all-star has been ejected in a playoff game since the NBA has been tracking this over the last 30 years. And so I think that was part of the calculus with the NBA decision not to fine him and not to suspend him for game 5 here, is that he already paid quite a price. Monetarily, it's a $2,000 fine, I think even $4,000 fine. It's not, nothing. It's a 5-figure fine for an NBA or a 4-figure fine for an NBA player. It's not a $50,000 fine for sure. But I think the NBA recognized that it was a huge hit for the San Antonio Spurs not to have him for most of that game in Minnesota. I think it was a dirty play. I think it was a bad look. I think Victor Wembanyama lost his cool, and I think he knew it. I don't think there was a fight going, leaving that court. I think he knew that he really overstepped his bounds doing that. And I think the conversation connecting it to James Harden and a 7-game suspension, I think it's disingenuous. I think it's intellectually dishonest when you are trying to compare Victor Wembanyama, a first-time offender on this, to a guy who had been suspended significantly more times than Victor Wembanyama. As we've seen with the Draymond Green suspensions, that does matter. Your track record does matter. And I think Victor Wembanyama, the first ejection of his career, I don't think it warranted a suspension.
Tonight, is tonight the final time we see LeBron James play in a Los Angeles Laker uniform?
Ooh, I'm going to say no. I don't think it's the last time. I would say he's going to be back. I don't say it's an absolute that he'll be back with the Lakers, but I say it's more than likely that he'll be back with the Lakers. I think with the Cleveland Cavaliers and the way that this might end for them, and I suspect that it will end for them quickly here against Detroit, I would not rule out that he goes back home to Cleveland. I actually think that that is a logical destination for him because he has so many roots there. And the whole storybook nature of him coming home for one last return to Cleveland to wrap up his career, this isn't a situation where he'd be picking up his family and moving to a foreign city or a city that he hasn't been to before. I do think that that should not be discounted, especially because the way this Cleveland season is playing out, that a reunion back to Cleveland, I think, would make some sense for LeBron. Now, the way that Austin Reeves has crumbled here in the postseason, coming back from his injury, I think the Lakers do need LeBron. I don't think that they can rely on Austin Reeves to get him over the hump in the postseason in ways that they were hoping for. And LeBron has been the best player on the Lakers by far this year. And so I think they should try to bring him back at a reasonable deal. And hopefully for them, Austin Reeves won't be as expensive. But I think LeBron James certainly – I don't think he's retiring. I think it's part of the question you're asking is if it is the last time for the Lakers, is it the last time for him, period? I think he'll be back. And I think it's probably likely he'll be back with the Lakers, but I would not discount the Cleveland variable considering how awful they've been this postseason.
You still on that San Antonio Spurs championship wagon, Tom?
I am.
All right.
I am.
Okay.
I mean, last night, notwithstanding, I do believe that the Spurs and Wemby's too good. I think OKC's been outrageously effective, obviously, in this postseason. But I still think that the way these guards play and the way they play so connected, I think Wemby and the Spurs are going to win it. And they've had the Oklahoma City Thunder number all season long. So I suspect we will see a repeat of the in-season tournament final with the Knicks and the Spurs winning it.
All right, my guy, where can people go find your work? I know you're a busy dude.
Yeah, Yahoo Sports, TomTheFinder.com, and Top Chef if you're into that. Pack your knives. So that's where you can find me.
Thank you, sir. Be good. Have a good week. We'll chat soon.
You got it, man.
All right, the great Tom Haberstroh. Some good stuff there on the draft lottery and, of course, the NBA playoffs. Brought to you today by our friends at IFA Country Stores. There's nothing like taking in a game on a sunny afternoon. You can get your field ready this summer with IFA's 4+ lawn care program. It's a blend especially formulated for Utah soils. Get healthy, lush, dark green grass this summer by making your power move today at IFA. All right, we'll catch a break. We're going to have Kurt Schmidt stop by. RSL got stomped over the weekend by Dallas. They've now lost 3 or 4. Bobby Marks a little bit later on, the ESPN NBA front office insider. His thoughts on the Jazz drafting a number 2. So stay tuned for that. More on the other side right here on ESPN 700. All right, we're going to do a little RSL later on. Kurt Schmidt will join us. Bobby Marks, ESPN NBA front office insider, will join us in the 4 o'clock hour. Excited to get Bobby's thoughts on this offseason ahead for the Utah Jazz, which just became very, very exciting yesterday afternoon after learning that the Jazz have moved up to two, I should say. Chicago, your big winner. Indiana, the clear loser. They lose their pick to the LA Clippers. So we'll get to Bobby coming up in just a little bit. Tonight, the last time you're going to watch your boy play in a Laker jersey? Our LeBron lover in there?
I don't think so, but it's a possibility for sure. I mean, at this point, he is, and we've been saying this for close to a decade now, but he really is on like his last stanza, his last era of basketball. So whatever he does decide to do, I kind of feel like the LA thing was intentionally what he wanted to go out and finish his career doing with his family, where they live, playing with his son, who's now like contributing to a roster. I think it'll take a lot to get him to leave that. So I don't think so, but we shall see.
Yeah, it was interesting.
I also think they win tonight.
Oh, you do? Have you been watching? Dude, it's not a fair fight.
No, I know. I don't know that I was serious there. I just hope they do.
Tom brings up the potential of him going back to Cleveland after living in Southern California for 6, 7, 8 years or whatever it's been, to roll back and deal with Cleveland winters or just roll back and deal with the city of Cleveland. I mean, that's a tough ask.
And you did the thing that you went to Cleveland to do.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, I don't know. If he does go anywhere, I do think it would be somewhere he's already played. Cleveland, Miami doesn't have like the roster or the need to do that at the moment. So I don't know, man. I see him in Los Angeles still.
The only rumor that I've heard that seems to make sense is Golden State. But right. LeBron, for the first time, and look, I get it. You never tell another man what to do with his money. I don't believe in looking at another man's pockets, okay? Financial decisions are your own, and you should maximize your earning. But he's never been willing to take anything other than an absolute max deal because he's LeBron freaking James. But if he wants to play for one more competitive team, he's probably gonna have to be willing to take a lot less money, and maybe Golden State's an option for him there.
Yeah, the thing is that if you want to be a contender and you want to get paid, you may already be in your best position with Luka there, with some shooters around you. As you said, it may just about be about taking a pay cut, which, yeah, at this point, I'm not sure I see happening.
Well, and he's always been the type of player you don't mind paying so much money to because he's always been A, awesome, and B, box office. If you're Rob Pelinka, though, do you want to use that money to start building around your 25, 26-year-old superstar player instead of because, dude, they're not close to Oklahoma City. They're not close to San Antonio. And, how much longer I don't want to say waste Luka's prime because LeBron's LeBron, but is there a chance the Lakers decide that it's time to move off of him? It's a tough one.
Maybe. I think that they would probably like to give another go at it if everything's just even, right, and you can bring him back, similar deal. You can bring him back with Luka healthy and try to take another stab at it. I think they probably would, but no, it's a fair point. When you're paying that much money to your top two guys, there's a reason you can't pay a center, right? Starting caliber center, and that's no disrespect to DeAndre Ayton or Jackson Hayes. It's just that's not worked out for them. So they could, and it might be long term a good move. There's some politics involved with that, though, if you're trying to move on from that guy.
All right, let's say you're running Washington. You are the owner, general manager. You're in charge of building the roster for the Washington Wizards. And I'm the Jazz, and I call you. And I say, all right, give us one. And I'm not going to do the Kevin Costner draft day thing. I'm not going to start throwing laptops against the wall. Mm-hmm. Enjoy your pancakes. side note, the corniest movie of all time.
I enjoyed it for what it was, but then I got to know people who worked in the NFL draft and scouting business, and did they talk to anyone in the room?
I want my picks back, all of them. Anyway, you give me one, I'll give you two. You give me Bilal Coulibaly, I'll give you Ace Bailey. Does Washington do that?
I'm going to reset real quick. First thing is, you're calling me the day after the NBA draft lottery.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to be like, these guys might really, really want this kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're already kind of taking some leverage away, as Tom alluded to, just by showing how much you're invested in this, how much you want an AJ DeBonsa. So first thing, I wouldn't call until like right before the draft.
But we're doing the show today.
Don't even mention it.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't want to show Washington that you're like almost desperate to make this deal happen, because then they have the leverage. They have more leverage. From what I understand, there was some interest between Washington and Ace Bailey beforehand. There was contact there. So that's probably the player you throw in there. I'm probably going to ask for more if I'm Washington. At the very least, to start, throw a pick in there, maybe another kind of established piece, even if it's a bench piece.
Sensible.
Yeah, like throw in a guy that has some promise, and throw in Ace Bailey, and give me a pick. It doesn't have to be a first. But give me a pick, and then we can discuss switching that up, because I do think that, if you have the two and you're trying to get the one, it's very clear what you're trying to do. It's very transparent what you're trying to do, and the team that you're going to trade with absolutely knows that. And just from that point right there, they kind of have all the leverage in this deal.
Yeah, and look, the secret's out. It's no secret as to, and if you saw the look on AJ's face when it was revealed Washington got the number 1 overall pick, now the secret's out as far as where Ace wants to go. Is he going to pull an Eli Manning? I don't think so. He doesn't strike me as that type of kid. And, he and his father have been very calculated about how this thing has been built, process-orientated step by step. I can't imagine he's going to hold out or something like that. And this comes down to one thing and one thing only. Like, has Washington done their calculation on who they believe they want? Because maybe they've decided. It's interesting to hear Tom talk about Darren Peterson, because there aren't very many people that are as low on him as Tom is. Now, the assist rate, I think he said 2 per 32 minutes. That's obviously very low. I'll reiterate what I said a little bit earlier. If you're just joining us, with Utah Jazz landing the number 2 overall pick, college tape is additive for a scout. It's not conclusive. We just have the ability now to watch these kids start playing at 12, 13, 14 years old. And scouts and executives around pro basketball, I've been watching this class specifically for probably 6 years, maybe even a little bit more. Because, with social media now, everything's televised. You can find video of really good players when they're very, very young, and then you can watch them grow. Okay, so I think most of us become familiar with these prospects when they make it to college and start playing college basketball, where all of their games are easy to find and televised on major networks. And then NCAA tournament rolls along, and we're all watching that. But from the business perspective of adding talent to your basketball team, you start the process of analyzing these guys when they're very, very young. So college tape is additive. It's not conclusive. And there's a part of me that believes if you analyze the entire data sample size, Darren Peterson's tape is as good, if not better, than AJ's. Now, AJ, I think, passed him this year. And I get it. Big 12 freshman of the year, all Big 12. The AJ DeBonsa experience, if you're a BYU fan, was everything you thought it could be from an individual standpoint. From a team standpoint, it was left wanting because it got hurt. But has Washington done their calculation that they do want AJ? Now, the problem is, of course, they're not going to tip their hand, right? So, as we were discussing, they'll probably feign, even if they want Darren or Boozer or whoever, they'll probably feign like, no, we're taking AJ. You want this pick, you've got to come make me an offer. I think Ace and 2 for Coulibaly in 1 is a deal that works for both teams. And I know the Jazz really love Ace. And there's a chance, I think if you're the Jazz, even though it's pretty clear you want AJ, you just roll with Darren Peterson and then see how Ace and Darren grow together, But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. All right. Here's the question I have for you, because we're going to send you to a golf course today. We're sending you to Stonebridge, ESPN 700, Festival of Tees, powered by the Utah Golf Association. Each day, we're giving away rounds to the best courses in the state. Listen to Sean from 11 to 2. Listen to me from 2 to 6 for your chance to win each day from ESPN 700. Details can be found on ESPN700sports.com. I'm going to ask you, Jazz fans, now that the Jazz have the number 2 overall pick, would you trade number 2 and Ace Bailey in exchange for number 1 and Bilal Coulibaly? Now, we do the thing around here where we feel like, we don't have to send out anything to get. This is a massive, massive deal. If you're able to swing it and grab the number 1 pick and you think AJ DeBonsa is willing to stay here for 10, 12 years and you think he is going to be as good as most people think, then you might have to sacrifice a young prospect like Ace, even though I love Ace. So 877-353-0700, would you do that trade? Porter will send one lucky listener to play golf at Stonebridge. Okay, 2 hours down, 2 hours to go. Kurt Schmidt and Bobby Marks. That's your 4 o'clock hour of the program right here on ESPN 700. MLS is about to take a very long break for the World Cup. 2 months, could be about a couple months. We're going to say goodbye to RSL for a little while the World Cup goes on, and hopefully they're going to be able to get back to form to send the squad out for break, with a better taste in their mouth. They've lost 3 of 4 after going down to Dallas and losing to Dallas 3-1 your final there. And Kurt Schmidt, technical director of the club, is kind enough to join us on a Monday. Hello, Kurt. Happy Monday, buddy. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for the time. So 3 of 4. Okay, we lost 3 of 4 at this point. Now, every game, of course, is an individual story. After the really bright start, are you seeing some things that maybe are starting to be a little bit concerning, Kurt?
Always concerned when we lose, and there's always things that we want to try to fix, that the coaching staff wants to fix, and that the players want to improve, and that's what we'll do. But the bones are still there, and the things that we do well, we still do well, and it's about continuing to find that form and consistency and do it game in, game out.
What are those things that you guys do well? Now that we have a good portion of the season to kind of analyze, most teams have played about 12 games. Obviously, as we discuss every time you join the show, this is a marathon, not a sprint, and it's a big time ask to play high-level soccer all year. What does the data, Kurt, indicate that what are you guys elite at as far as the start of the season?
Yeah, the way that we defend higher up the field, the way that we press and recover the ball in dangerous spots is very, very good. And, I think a few people in the league have commented that we can be very difficult to play against. And, it's always something that's good to hear. But the team can be very difficult defensively to build out against and to play against. I think offensively, we're very good when we can get out in transition and when we can win the ball, even in deeper positions, and get forward very quickly, or draw the team out with a lower build and create some space that we can attack into and run in behind. So we do both of those things really, really well at a high level. And, I think there's games when you have more of those opportunities. There's games when you have less, and obviously when you have fewer of those opportunities, like we did on Saturday, you gotta finish the ones that you get, and you've got to be stout defensively. And unfortunately, we didn't do those things.
On the other side, and you just touched on a couple of them, where do you guys need to be better? Just overall, not in one match or one moment, just overall, where do you think you guys need to improve?
Yeah, I mean, to be perfectly honest, you saw it in this last game, and I think those are things that we've targeted for improvement, that we've highlighted as well, even before this game, as areas where we can make gains. But transition defending was not up to standard in this last game. I think in some other games, set piece defending has been something that we've targeted for improvement as well. And, the other thing is, we can be very good when we attack into space and in transition moments. We need to improve our ability to break down a more compact block defensively. How do we attack them? How do we get numbers in the box? And how do we create chances when the other team doesn't allow as much space in their block?
What are the dynamics in play as far as balancing out the group after starting a 3-game week? I mean, it's one thing to, have a couple days off. I mean, this is a sprint, okay? So you go Dallas. Now you have 2 home games, which is nice, at America First Field with Houston and Colorado. And then I believe, the final game before the break will be Minnesota, and that's on the road. But how are you guys looking to make sure the group stays fresh by balancing out the 11 and the 18 this week?
Yeah, I mean, it's good to be at home. We don't have to travel another day, which is positive. But at the end of the day, we've got to just recover and perform. And I think it's a good time to rotate some guys in. I think we have some good depth. Some of it is started on Saturday due to some injuries, and some of it you'll see on Wednesday as we rotate some guys in that deserve a shot and have been doing well. So we look forward to seeing what they can bring us. And, I think it's just about making sure that over these next 2 games that we maximize our performance through, the players that we put out there, the personnel choices, but also the freshness of those players, their ability to, peak at the right time. We do a lot of a lot of a lot of work on that side of things in terms of making sure that the training rhythm is structured so that the players can peak physically on game day, and that becomes much harder when you've got the Wednesday game in the middle of the week. But we've got to try to manage minutes to make sure that we can do that as much as possible.
Wonder how, so the secondary transfer window, the summer transfer window, July 13th to September the 2nd. As a guy who is, one of the main voices of acquiring talent, roster construction, what sort of complication does the World Cup bring to that dynamic specifically?
What kind of complication does the World Cup bring? I mean, it puts the window in a better place this year than it actually has been in the past. There's more games after the window this year than there has been in the past. I don't know. I think it's been 4 or 5 years where it's been more 2/3, 1/3. So that's a big positive. We don't like, I think, when there's a huge chunk cut out sort of in the middle of the year. It does interrupt sort of your rhythm, your momentum, and all those sorts of things. And we'll have to have a mini camp to come back from that and be ready to go. Our goal is to have, at least one new face, if not more, joining us when we open that camp. But, obviously a lot of things need to go down before we get there.
So when it comes to players that are actually involved in the World Cup, I'm honestly curious here, asking just to ask, because the international soccer ecosystem is so interesting to me because it's so vast and there's so many different levels and leagues. And I'm sure you're constantly watching and talking to people about this player or that player. Then obviously your phone's ringing, of course, about some of these bright young stars like Gozo and Luna. When the players are actually playing in the World Cup, I mean, are you able to discuss certain options about moving on from them? Is there some sort of dynamic where you have to wait to kind of see what they do? Does this make sense? How does that work?
Yeah, it just depends on the player. Obviously, their contract situation is important. Some players are out of contract this summer. Some of them, it requires a transfer. Obviously, if a guy's playing at the World Cup, he's usually, doing well enough for his club, and he's informed for his club. So you've got to take that into account, that these are not, generally cheap players, because they're some of the best players in the world. But yeah, I mean, it does, as exciting of an event, that is, and as good as those players can be, it is a tricky proposition. Obviously, if we acquire a player who's in the World Cup, he's obviously not going to join us until he's done, and he'll likely need a break at that point as well, just physically. He will have been going since August or something the previous year in most cases, and will not have had a summer break yet once his season ended, because he'll roll straight into the national team. So it'll be a bit of a delayed gratification, I think, if we end up picking someone up who's at the World Cup. But obviously that comes with the upside of the quality of the signing.
Now, of course, you guys maintained a designated player spot. We were talking to Jay about this last week. I know you're not going to announce right now who you're going to sign in the summer. I understand that. But with the ability to fill another hole with a big opportunity as far as the DP and what that sort of spend would look like, how are you guys just kind of approaching that roster building piece you have in your back pocket?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good way to phrase it, back pocket, because, it's like you look at the group and it's a good group, right? And these are some young, exciting players on the field that have done a really good job and will continue to do a good job for us. So it's about adding a piece to the group that can enhance what we're doing more than, having someone come in and expect them to sort of save our season. We're not in that situation. And, having them come in and, whole hog replace someone who's been playing really well is not maybe the right thing either. So we want to make sure that we bring someone in that makes everyone better. We think we did that in the winter with the signings we brought in, that, not only are they good players in their own right, but I thought we acquired some players that also made their teammates better and made everyone around them better. And so it's important that whether it's a DP or a TAM signing or a college draft pick, that we bring in the right guy that's going to enhance the group and add to what we're doing, give us extra tools to hopefully maybe even accomplish some of the issues that we just talked about that we need to improve upon, but also make us stronger for the second half.
I don't think I've ever asked you this, and we were talking with Pablo last week about the upcoming shift to the calendar to align with the European leagues. I probably don't even know how to articulate it properly, but you know the deal, and everybody's heard about it. Obviously, the Millers are going to probably have to do some things with the stadium out there to make sure that the consumer experience isn't frigid when we actually have a winter. We probably could have got away with it last year, ironically enough, but from a roster construction standpoint, with what you do for a living, do you like the upcoming MLS calendar switch?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sort of the meat of my job in terms of acquiring and sometimes selling players. It actually helps us to align it with, we say European and is European, but also more the global windows. And, as we head into the summer, like that's when, teams in Europe are doing their off-season squad building. So they're releasing players, they're selling players, they're acquiring players. Their budgets are bigger than in the middle of the season, and all those things are happening as we head into these next few months in the summer. For us, that's our mid-season window. So obviously, we have a lot less flexibility generally in mid-season because we've already started. We're halfway through. We've made those moves in the winter window, and we've acquired those guys in the winter. So it's that mismatch causes some issues, and it will certainly alleviate those when we're starting our season same time as them. So when they want to get rid of someone that maybe is we see as an important part of their squad, but they're willing to move them, we have more players available to us, or there's more players available to us on free contracts, free transfers, things like that. So it's going to make things a little bit, I'm not going to say easier because I don't think it's like ever really easy, but it will certainly give us a lot more options in terms of both signing new players, but also when we sell players, and to be able to move players in the window when more European clubs are acquiring them, and it's in our off season when we would be selling those players. It's obviously a lot easier to do that in the off season when we can build up our squad more after they depart than it is in the middle of your season when you're midstream.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm looking at your roster. Where would you look to add, Kurt? Like, I'm sincerely asking because I feel like you have a really good, complete group, maybe as confident for me in the group that you put together in quite some time. And I mean top to bottom. Like, it's not just an 11, you're deep. And I feel like you might be too deep at every single position. Like, where would you look to add if you did add?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, right? And this was what I was alluding to before, which is, finding the right guy that can enhance what we're doing. Is it someone who can facilitate and get the ball to those guys, in better positions? Is it someone that can finish chances? Is it someone that can finish games? Is it someone that's maybe a specialist that helps us in that situation where we can break down a low block and a compact defense more easily? So, as far as the tool, what we want to add is someone who gives Pablo more tools to be able to attack different teams, different setups, different lineups, and also have the depth, not just to impact a game off the bench, but to work through 3-game weeks like this. To be a good team in this league, in any league, you need more than 11 good players. And I do think right now we have more than 11 good players, and I think if we add 1 or 2 more pieces, an increases our depth, increases our competition for places in both, throughout the squad from top to bottom. I think that'll be hugely beneficial.
I mean, the potential there is really exciting. Do you allow yourself, you're a pretty measured, pragmatic guy, but do you allow yourself to get excited? Like, do you enjoy this type of stuff? Because I'm listening to you talk about potential additions to a team that I think is really damn good already. Do you allow yourself, are you having fun living your life, Kurt?
I have fun when we win, and I have less fun when we don't.
Yeah.
It probably affects me more than it should when we don't get a result, and even when you can talk about all the reasons and be all analytical about why we didn't get a result. It affects me, and so and that's honestly what motivates me to improve things and to do better. And I know that as much as I like our group, and I really do like our group, and we have a lot of guys that are doing some really, really good things. I know that we can be better. I know that it's not there yet, and it's almost a project, projects like this, building teams like this, you're never finished, right? You can always add a piece, someone's always coming to maybe take a piece. Like, there's always work to do. And, I enjoy it, and maybe it doesn't always come through in my voice, Spence, but I do enjoy it, and it gets me up and it motivates me, and I think I'm sometimes staying up at weird hours watching players on my laptop, in the living room, and looking at scouting reports and doing all kinds of stuff like that, and I probably wouldn't do that if I didn't like it.
Fair enough. We're 15 days away from the U.S. men's national team announcing their roster. Where are we at with Diego? How are we feeling? We think he's going to make it. He's been doing everything he can. I mean, he's fit. He's in form. He's scoring. He's providing service. So, what do you think the possibility is, Kurt?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good. I think Diego deserves it. I think he's worked really hard. He was a big part of the team, throughout last season, and nothing's a given. He's got to earn it every day, and I think since he's got healthy this year, he's been going out there and doing the business. And so I think the most important thing for him is to keep doing the business, to keep being, a good teammate, a hardworking guy, someone that Pochettino can rely upon, someone that, he has to be the guy that Pochettino called in as much as he did last year, which is, the guy that has great determination and fights through hardship to get the result, and that's what he is. And if he goes to the World Cup, I think nobody would be happier than he would. But I'd be right there, and so would the rest of our club, and we'd be very proud of him. And whether he plays no minutes or 90 minutes a game, I know he's going to give it his all. So I think he's doing well. I think he's doing what he can do. He's controlling the controllables with his performance. And hopefully for him and his family, the coaches see that and they bring him in. I think that'd be fantastic for the club and for the city and everything.
Last thing before I say you lose. What the hell is what's going on in Dallas? Excuse me. Why is it so tough to go down there and get a win? I mean, look, I don't want to take anything away from them. They're a solid team this year. They're right next to you in the standings. But historically speaking, I think RSL has 2 wins in Dallas. Why is that such a tough place to play?
I mean, I guess I'll go with the easy cop out, and it's weather, and even when it's even when it's May and it's not the middle of July or August, which we all know can be a lot worse there, it's still a far cry from home, from Salt Lake in May. So weather is a big part of it. Sometimes when we sign, when we have a decent chunk of new players in the team, and obviously we have a few players who made their first. Who are in their first MLS season and made their first starts in Texas, and that sort of humidity, it can affect them. And it's not an easy thing to do to play, and especially to play the way that that we play with the intensity. To do that for 90 minutes in that sort of heat and humidity can be difficult. And for sure, I think it's played a part in the results over time. The team has been different, right? Dallas has been different every time we go down there over the past, whatever it's been, 5-6 years or more. But right now they're obviously a very good team. They're hard to break down. They were lethal in transition. They've got really good players on both sides of the ball, and you combine that with their home field advantage, and it becomes very difficult to win there. And none of those are reasons why we can't win there. We expect to go to Texas and get results, and we've gotten results there. But we didn't get it this time. But much like we have our home field advantage here with the altitude and how we expect teams, or how we expect to run teams, down as the game goes on here.
Kurt, appreciate the time, man. Have a great week. Good luck on Wednesday. We'll chat soon. Okay.
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate it.
All right, Kurt Schmidt, RSL Technical Director. RSL back in action coming up on Wednesday against Houston. That's kind of a must-win game here. 3 more games, then a 2-month break for the World Cup. We'll find out if Diego Luna has made the team in just over 2 weeks. Before we catch a break, don't forget Bobby Marks is going to join us coming up next. Excited for this. I want to tell you about my friends at Wasatch Medical Spa. They're a new client. My friend Shelly joins us in studio from time to time. Shelly's brought a brand new technology to the market known as Apex RF. Okay, so we're talking men's sexual wellness. If there are little ears in the car, you might want to turn it down for a minute. But she allowed me to go through her process. It's a 6-session treatment, and it works. That's all I can say. I don't want to get too graphic on the radio, but I'm telling you, you guys, you should go through this. This is what she offers, okay? Improvement with size, girth, sensation, and duration is what she likes to say. And as a result of them being a client on the show, you get a free consultation with no obligation. So that's something you should definitely just go do to get more information. So book that online at wasatchmedicalspa.com. That's wasatchmedicalspa.com. And then the deal they have for my listeners only is you get $300 off your first treatment. Massive savings at Wasatch Medical Spa. The technology is Apex RF. Book online now at wasatchmedicalspa.com. All right, Bobby Marks joins us coming up next on ESPN 700. Shout out to our good friends at IFA Country Stores. Any drive to the basket begins with the first step. On the court, that's the ultimate power move. IFA's Step 1 crabgrass preventer and their lawn food is the first choice to give your yard the healthy, thick green look you admire. The neighbors will be green with envy. You can shop IFA online at ifa.coop or stop by one of their neighborhood stores today. All right, we're efforting Bobby Marks. And if you know the business, efforting means we are doing everything we can to get Bobby on the show. Sometimes a little peek behind the curtain. Guests cancel last minute or cell phone stuff goes down. So we'll try to get Bobby on the show. Of course, ESPN's NBA front office insider who upset some people out here. I guess that's how I'll gently say that when he talked about the Jazz basically affecting the integrity of the NBA. I can tell you Bobby is a great guy and very good at what he does and very good at what he was doing in the NBA before he decided to go over to the media side of things. So some interesting things I wanted to get with Bobby today because he's kind of a cap guy. The Jazz, in addition to having the number 2 overall pick in the NBA draft, I believe their main financial mechanism to add talent is a $15 million non-taxpayer exemption. So, of course, we're going to see what Walker Kessler's contract looks like. Then we'll kind of understand the financial situation of where the Utah Jazz are. And, of course, with the number 2 pick, you're going to add a nice little contract there. So Walker's contract, most people believe the rumors out there are between like 25 and maybe 28 mil. I think Walker's camp feels like he's worth a little bit more. And then once we, understand what that is, exactly what the number is, we'll be able to tell exactly what they have at their disposal to add more talent. Walker's on the books right now with a $14.6 million free agent hold. Okay, so that's the number that I have in front of me. That's obviously going to change when he signs that extension. But they will have that $15 million non-tax mid-level exception to use if they want to add another piece to the puzzle. Now, a lot of this is going to come down to who the Jazz end up with on draft night on June the 23rd. A lot of conversation about whether or not it's AJ or Darren at 1. Tom Haberstroh, he likes Cameron Boozer better than both of the two. So if you're Washington, as we discussed, this dynamic of what Danny Ainge did once upon a time when the Boston Celtics had the number 1 overall pick and Markelle Fultz, the kid from Washington, was almost a consensus number 1. At least that's, if my memory serves right. I'm not sure how many people thought that Tatum should be the pick. I thought it was easy to see that Tatum was awesome. And I just never thought Fultz was going to be a high-level shooter. So Danny sends 1 to Philly and says, yeah, go ahead and take him because I'm going to get my guy, Jason Tatum. So that obviously worked out because Jason Tatum has turned into maybe one of the top 7 or 8 players in basketball. Boston's been to a grip of Eastern Conference Finals. They won a championship, and Danny was able to grab Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown in back-to-back years. So Danny has a lot of experience with this as it pertains to how to play this the right way. Because if we're honest, there is no hiding the fact that the Jazz want AJ. And if you saw the look on AJ's face last night, now it seems to be pretty apparent that AJ wants Utah, or at least not Washington. If they say, they say looks don't lie. You saw the look on his face when it was announced that Washington was 1 and Utah was at 2. The deal there, the problem with that dynamic is there's not a lot of leverage when everybody knows your hand. So Washington holds the cards here. And the Jazz are going to have to get tricky if they do want to end up with A.J. DeBonsa. Is Darren Peterson a nice, secondary prize? Seems like it, depending on who you talk to. I mean, there's a lot of noise around Darren Peterson because of the season he had at Kansas. I'll maintain that if you look at the overall data, and if you discover tape back when this class kind of started to get everybody's attention, I think there's a compelling case that Darren Peterson is still the best prospect in this draft. I would probably, if I'm Washington, I probably would just take AJ and not think about it. But if the scenario's out there that Washington has done their calculation, and maybe they like Darren, they're not going to tell the Jazz that, but maybe they like Darren, and you just kind of play the hand like, well, okay, if you want AJ, you've got to come get 1 from us. And if you're Washington, maybe you're fine grabbing Darren Peterson at 2. And what would the Jazz add to the package to move up. Because if you're Washington, you're asking for everything. We were discussing the possibility because there was a kind of a rumor out there floating around online, which means it's not true at all. Would the Jazz trade Ace Bailey and the number 2 pick to Washington in exchange for number 1 and like Bilal Coulibaly, one of their young players that isn't Alex Sarr? They're not trading him. That feels like a lot to give up, but we might be a little bit biased because Ace has been here for a year and he's awesome. He's really good. Bilal Coulibaly is a good player. I don't think he's as good as Ace, but again, if you're going to go up and get, if you're going to go get something, you got to give something up. I mean, that's kind of how this stuff works. You're not just going to be able to lowball the Washington Wizards, who own all the cards now and have all the cards in their hand after landing the number 1 overall pick. So ultimately, that's the complication here. And with the Jazz, so because what the Jazz could end up with if you don't make the deal, with this proposed situation and scenario, would you rather have Ace Bailey and Darren Peterson or A.J. DeBonce and Bilal Coulibaly? And look, no one has any clue whether or not these types of discussions are happening, but there are plenty of people that cover the league that are already reporting talks are ongoing, that the Nets are interested in the number 1 overall pick, and they'd like to engage with Washington to try to maybe figure something out there. If Washington is taking calls on one, you can be sure that Danny Ainge is going to inquire and Austin Ainge is going to inquire. And Austin last night, well, I guess yesterday afternoon. By the way, a really weird, broadcasting situation. Like, they had the lottery, and there were so many things of note that went down. The Pacers losing their pick to the Clippers, the Bulls moving all the way up to 4, and there was no reaction. They just went right to the game. It's like, hey, there's a lottery. Boom, time for Knicks Sixers, which, by the way, was over after 1 quarter. I didn't love the way the NBA decided to handle that. I don't know, still don't know why they did it on a Sunday afternoon. It's usually Tuesday or Wednesday. But the lottery was such compelling theater. Like, you should hang around for a little 10, 15-minute recap to kind of walk everybody through exactly what had just went down. Jazz about a 34% chance to get a top 3 pick. So we can put the narrative to bed that the NBA hates us because we're in Utah. The lottery is not rigged. It never has been. It never will be. It just was the Jazz time. You hang in there long enough and hopefully the right thing comes your way. You get the right little piece of luck. And the unfortunate part of how you have to do your business in professional basketball is you have to have luck. You have to. It's a part of it. For all the celebration about how the San Antonio Spurs built their dynasty with Tim Duncan, David Robinson before that, both those guys were number 1 overall picks. And consensus generationally special players. Now, they did some smart things with Tony Parker later on. Jazz should have drafted him. Shout out Raul Lopez, right? Manu Ginobili. I'm not saying the Spurs didn't do other things that were really smart, but it doesn't go anywhere without Duncan or Robinson and now Wembanyama, who is also a generational player that they snagged with the number 1 overall pick. But it's not just that. Stephon Castle at 4, Dylan Harper at 2. San Antonio has been incredibly lucky and savvy. You can be both, but you've got to have both, okay? What the Jazz have never been is incredibly lucky. And I understand the frustration as to year after year as we're sitting here watching the lottery, either the Jazz have ended up where they were most likely to end up, like last year. Okay, I know everybody was mad, but that was the most likely scenario at number 5, or we've seen them fall. So finally, the Jazz get the luck that this organization has been waiting for a long time. It's been 46 years since they drafted Darrell Griffith at 2. My guy Golden Griff out of Louisville, and he was awesome. His numbers retired, stayed here 10 years. And Austin said last night, or in the afternoon after the lottery, whoever we go get, we want the player to be here 10 years. See, I found that to be a little bit more of a message, right? Because, of course, you want that. But the problem is we haven't been able to find that. They've drafted some good players. They've developed some good players. Now it's time to retain the players you draft and develop. And if you can do that, then you got a shot here, okay? But I didn't find that just as a flippant comment from Austin. I felt like that was calculated because there's some wild cards here that are involved with the Jazz at 2 that typically we don't have these narratives. And these narratives sound like this. A.J. DeBonce played his college basketball at BYU. His family lives here, played high school ball here, has a relationship with the owner, and is there some sort of understanding that if somehow, some way, the Jazz can find a way to land him, is he more than just a guy that's going to play here through his rookie deal and then the second deal that he signs and then will leave as soon as he can? Like if you have that on good authority, it honestly might be worth sending number 2 and Ace Bailey to Washington to grab AJ. I mean, I don't know if Ace is staying. I have no idea. It's way too early to even surmise anything when a player's only in his second year. But these guys talk all the time, and you have an idea as to whether or not the guy that you have on your team is going to agree to stay beyond his ability to decide when to leave. So what happened with Donovan? I mean, we can talk about, and I've talked about it quite a bit. Like I will always believe there was more meat on that bone with Mitchell, Gobert, Quinn. I will always believe that there were other options than completely tearing it all down. Now, 4 years later, we finally have some traction, and we can kind of see what the plan is looking like as it's crystallized. But ultimately, what Danny and everyone else just started to realize and understand is that Donovan doesn't want to live here anymore, and he's going to leave as soon as he can. So we might as well go get everything we can for him, and they did. I mean, it was a good deal for the Jazz, good deal for the Cavs. They've been a good team with Mitchell. They're still in the postseason. Same thing with Gobert. You know, like I think Rudy would have stayed here, but what does that team look like without Mitchell? We've done that exercise before. If they just did the Donovan trade, what does it look like with Gobert and Markkanen? And we're kind of spinning our wheels because again, you've traded a maybe top 15 player in the league, and that's what this roster still needs. That's what makes draft night fun. Because when we see the preseason NBA player rankings list, ESPN does it, The Ringer does it, Athletic does it. Markkanen and Jaren Jackson Jr., the two best players on this team right now, are they top 25 players? Maybe. That's probably the area that they live in. And maybe Markkanen can rise up the list when he's, allowed to play. Heaven forbid. Because we forget that he's awesome, because we haven't seen him play very much basketball. But you're not going to find a championship contending team who their two best players are maybe 22 and 24 in the league. You got to find a guy that can crack that top 10 thereabouts if you want to win a trophy. Can AJ do that? I think he can. Can Darren do that? I think maybe. Cameron Boozer, Caleb Wilson, these young players we're learning about. That's the final piece to this puzzle that could change the calculation of who they are in the Western Conference. All right, we'll catch a break. Final hour of the program coming up right here on ESPN 700. All right, we are up against it. We got to get out of here. Some good NBA playoff tonight. Hopefully some good NBA playoffs tonight with Detroit and Cleveland, Oklahoma City and the Lakers. Thunder trying to sweep L.A. The winner of Detroit-Cleveland will play the New York Knicks. Battle for Lord Stanley's Cup continues to roll along, and obviously the big piece of news that came down over the weekend, the Utah Jazz, Little Lady Luck, number 2 overall in the NBA draft. Porter, what's coming up on a Tuesday edition of the show?
Tuesday edition of the program. Kevin Reynolds stops by. Kev was on site at the NBA draft lottery. He's on site at the NBA draft combine. So Kev will stop by the program, give us the latest, the lowdown from there. Dave Fox in studio on a Tuesday. And of course, our guy Chris Kamrani will be in studio for an entire hour as well. So we'll start there, and as you mentioned, hopefully some good NBA playoffs.
There you go. So join us for a Tuesday show. Kamrani's going to give us his draft big board. He committed to creating a big board, remember?
There we go.
Okay, so we'll get with CK on that. We will say goodnight for a Monday show. Special thank you to CJ Moore, Tom Haberstroh, and Kurt Schmidt. If you miss any of the sound from the show, go to the website, ESPN700sports.com. Download the mobile app. Take us on the go. Best way to listen to the station. Then for what we do in our space, 4 hours every afternoon, check out the podcast page, and it's called The Drive with Spence Checketts. It's available wherever you get your shows. For Porter, I'm Spence saying goodnight. Have a good Monday evening. We'll talk to you on a Tuesday drive. As always, you can catch that right here on ESPN.